Welcome to the third part of this tutorial series. We already have the dough, we have the frosting. Now we have to make some sprinkles and we're gonna look at that in this tutorial. I'm glad you're here. My name's Chris. Let's do this. Okay, frosting is done. Next up, sprinkles. Cool. What is a sprinkle? Well, it's these tiny little cylinders. Okay, so first of all, we need a cylinder. Let's take the dough again. Shift D. So now we have this. Let's call this sprinkle. Now let's call it sprinkle 1, because maybe we want to do more than one sprinkles. Okay, cool. Now let's get rid of all of this here. So my sprinkle 1 is a single vertex in the center. First of all, we're gonna need a, where am I? Geometry nodes. Okay, we're gonna need a new node tree. We're gonna create a cylinder, and luckily we have a mesh primitive for cylinder. This is cool. Yeah, so we have the cylinder. I don't think we need 32 vertices. Something like 16 should be enough. Don't worry about the scale for now. I just want this to be like, I don't know, like this. One sprinkle, huge sprinkle, but we can scale it huge. We can scale it down in our geometry nodes that we're gonna use to place or to distribute those sprinkles. Now we just made a sprinkle. So this node tree should also be called sprinkles 1, right? Cool. It's just a cylinder. Maybe we want this cylinder to be smooth. How do we do that? We go attribute, fill. Hold on a second. The shade smooth. What is the value? Should probably be a boolean with on. Yeah, cool. So now we have a smooth cylinder. I don't even know if this is going to copy over then to the distribution. We'll see. Anyway, so now we have a cylinder. Now let's go back to our frosting and to the geometry nodes editor of the frosting. Where is it? Over here. This one. So now we could add all of those sprinkles right in here on top of this geometry in this one here. So our final frosting geometry, we use that to put sprinkles on. We can do that, and I've done that before. So you have, like down here, you create your sprinkle distribution, and that's fine. And then you can also assign a different material to that using the attribute fill node and setting the, I don't know what it's called now, the material index. But you can do that. You can actually create geometry and then assign different materials all in geometry nodes. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use or make a new object because I can show you another interesting feature here. I'm gonna again copy the dough, Shift D, call it. This is going to be sprinkles. Okay, sprinkles. Sprinkles. Let me delete all of these. Screw this place. Sprinkles is now just a single vertex. And on here, we're gonna create a new geometry nodes tree. And since this is just a single vertex, how do we get sprinkles on top of the frosting? Well, cool thing is, in geometry nodes, we can get the geometry of another object. So we're again not using this incoming vertex, that's just single vertex. We're gonna basically completely ignore that. We're gonna go input object info. What do we want? We want the frosting, because that's what we want to place the thing on. We can switch this to relative in case we move it. And then here we have the frosting geometry, the finished geometry of our pink frosting. And that is what we are going to place our sprinkles on top of. So if I hide the donut and I hide the frosting, now this is my frosting copy. Okay, it's called sprinkles. And here we're going to do point distribute with a little bit of a density here. What are we distributing? Well, we're going to instance our sprinkle. Sprinkle 1. Oi. Well, that's a big sprinkle, so we need a point scale. Scale this down to, I have no idea, to something really small. I'm gonna hide sprinkle 1. Maybe show the frosting. Where is the frosting? Here's the frosting. Where are our sprinkles? Are they too small now? Here are the sprinkles. So we can play with this here a little bit to make it an interesting size, so we can see something. Now this doesn't look like sprinkles. And the reason for that is that we need to rotate our points. So here we're scaling them. Now we're gonna do point rotate. Oh, you know what? Now, let's delete point rotate. Let's do attribute randomize. And we're going to randomize a vector. We're going to replace and we're not gonna replace create. We're going to add. Since they're all aligned along the normal now, we're gonna add to the normal some random value on the, what is it, the x axis, and we want to lay them flat onto the surface, right? Sprinkles don't look like that. Sprinkles lay on the surface. So for the x value, we're gonna do 90 degrees, which would be 3.9 pi divided by 2, 1.571 min max. And we want to randomize, which is not really randomized now, the rotation. Cool. So now they're laying on the surface, and if we set this to 0, so now this node actually doesn't do anything, it's just rotating on the x to make them lay on the surface, which looks cool. Probably need a lot more of those. So, okay. And now we can actually randomize the x, the y and the c a little bit, or maybe just the c, from something like this to something like this. Cool. So we're using this one node now to rotate them 90 degrees so that they're on the surface, and then we're rotating the c, and we're rotating the global c here. And so some of them stick out a little and some of them don't. I think this looks pretty cool, pretty nice. But of course, we have sprinkles all over the place. And if you sprinkle sprinkles onto something, they're just on the top. So how do we do that? We're gonna have to set this density here. The point distribute has this density input, which is an attribute. And we can tell geometry nodes only put points where we want them with this density filter here. And where do we want them? Well, let me see. We're going to have to attribute separate x, y, z, take the position of each vertex and store it in the C. Cool. And then, question is, does this already come with the C? This already has the C from this geometry. I don't need this node. Haha. Hold on a second. Since this is using the frosting, and the frosting has our geometry nodes on it, where I already separated the x, y, z, right? And I used the final C calculation for the final C position. I should be able to use that C, plug in an attribute math node, and go greater than, if C is greater than a certain value, then I'm gonna call this mask 1 and plug mask 1 in here. Ooh, yes. And now I can play with this greater than, And I can put sprinkles just on the top. Cool, sprinkles on the top. Nice one. Now, how about another set of sprinkles? How about maybe like, I don't know, little round dots of sugar sprinkles. I don't know if they exist, but let's do this anyway. So this is sprinkle 1, which is this huge thing here. I'm gonna shift D sprinkle 1, call it sprinkle 2. Now hide sprinkle 1. Sprinkle 2 has its own geometry node now. No, it doesn't. We have to create a new one. So make a new one, sprinkle 2, and instead of a cylinder, we're gonna use a mesh primitive, maybe an icosphere with 2 subdivisions. I don't know if I need this smooth. Okay, so now I have this icosphere here. Cool, that's it. Hide sprinkle 2, go back to our sprinkles object over here. And then we do the same thing that we already did here for the cylinders with the other sprinkles. So let's duplicate this. By the way, you could also create a group out of this now. Maybe we should do that after. But for now, we're just going to copy this. We also need another one of those because we maybe want the sprinkles to go down a little further on the side here. What are we instancing? We're going to instance sprinkle 2 instead of sprinkle 1. And then what do we have here? Density, we probably need a lot more. Randomize, that shouldn't matter that much. But we need to join our geometry in the back here because we want the cylinders and the icospheres. And then we have this. Cool. All right, now we need a lot more of those. 500. Ooh, cool. That's a lot. 400. I don't know. And like I said, I want them to go down further on the side here. So we have the dots. A lot of dots. 300. Everywhere, and they go further down. And then we have the cylinder sprinklies here. You know what? We should also randomize the size here a little bit. So let's take this, bring it back a little. Do another attribute, randomize, attribute, randomize? Sure. We want to randomize a vector. What do we want to randomize? The scale? Maybe we want to replace, maybe we want to multiply. So now they're all pretty small. Maybe something like 0.8 to 1.2. So we have different size sprinkles. They're hard to see at the moment because they're all white, but we're gonna work on that in a second. All right, so now we have a little bit randomized sprinkles. The sprinkle is this tall cylinder. What if I randomize this point scale? Point scale. Oh, here I just take it down a lot and then I add, I multiply. Okay. How can I, before instancing it, maybe make them shorter? So what if I do 1.5? Do I have different length now? Hard to tell. We also need to move the sprinkles up on the z-axis a little bit. Maybe we should do that in here. Geometry transform. Actually, we would need to move them out on the normal. But I'm just gonna move them up on the z for now. A little bit like that. Now do we have different lengths? Yeah, it looks like we have different lengths because of this here. Randomizing the scale, and I'm randomizing the C differently than the X and the Y. Cool. So now let's put those dots back in, and we have this. That's a lot. 150. Okay. Now, one last thing, but I'm not going to do this now because this is taking too long, way too long already. You might not want this like this perfect cutoff line here. You might want to add another texture maybe. You know how it works. And then you have sprinkles. Now let's finish up with the material for the sprinkles. So we go to the shader editor and we need sprinkles to have a material. And it currently has the dough material, but they're all white. So we already know that the material is not working. Well, anyway, I'm gonna remove this, create a new material, call it sprinkles. And sprinkles. So we're gonna need some colors. But first of all, we have to make sure that it works. So let me set it to green and then go to the sprinkles, geometry nodes. This is our original geometry. And maybe it works if I just add that in here. Does it turn green then? No. Maybe now we need to add an attribute fill, and we want to fill an integer onto the material index and set it to 0, and they're green. Yes. So you can see that the material thing with geometry nodes, when you create your own geometry using geometry nodes, it's not quite clear to me yet, but there's those two tricks basically. First of all, you have to have a material list on your geometry, which you can get by simply adding that one vertex to your geometry. And then you can always change the material of geometry, maybe just of a certain part of it, by setting the material index attribute, and the value is 0 because it's the first material in the list here. If you have multiple materials, you can set different values here, of course. But for what we want to do here, we can actually not easily change the material index for the different pieces of geometry. We're just going to use a cool feature in the shader editor for cycles. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work in Eevee, but it works in cycles. And that is the attribute input. Now, where is it? Yep, here. So the attribute input geometry has this random per island output. And this is wonderful, wonderful, because we can create a color ramp. So what does random per island do? The shader looks at the geometry and says, okay, this is its own separate island. And I'm going to create a random number for that. And over here is another separate island. So another sprinkle in our case. I'm going to create another random for a value for that. So this is going to be our factor. And this is to be the color. And you can see we get different shades of black and white. So if we set this to constant, and we add some color stops here, we can make blue sprinkles, and we can make some group, maybe like this sprinkles. Whoops. Anyway, so let's do this, and white. So we have 3 different colors. And our little dots have those 3 different colors as well. Now we do have our issue with the normals here, obviously. And this is interesting. Does this work? Yeah.
A few minutes later.
I'm not sure why the ends look like they're separate.
Minutes later.
The random per island. It looks like those cylinders, sprinkle 1.
Later.
Looks like everything has its own island. This is weird. Okay, this is the first time I'm seeing this.
Later.
Why is that? Hold on, maybe. Okay, of course Blender crashed, but it gave me some time off camera to figure out what the problem is, and I cleaned up some things. So now here you can see we have different colors for the different sprinkles, and of course you can add more color stops here. So what was the problem? Well, it was this auto smooth here. So if you set auto smooth on the sprinkles object, then this is what happens. The shader thinks that each face is its own island. And if you switch that off, then you get what we actually want. So I also cleaned up some stuff here. I put the two sprinkle objects into a sprinkle collection so I can just disable it. It still works, it's still there, but we don't have those huge objects in the middle here, okay? So that was that. And then in the sprinkles geometry nodes over here, I played around here a little, moved stuff around just to figure out what is happening, but that really doesn't matter. I'm still joining in my original incoming geometry, filling the material index with a value of 0 here. I'm joining together my sprinkle 1 and sprinkle 2 distribution. This is just to move it up on the z-axis a little. Over here I only cleaned up this because for the cylinders I have mask 1, and then down here I called it mask 2, and using mask 2 because I just copied that before and it was both called mask 1. So this is cleaned up. Now we have a donut with sprinkles, and it is like 99% made with geometry nodes and of course modifiers. That's it for the third and final part of this tutorial series. We now have a complete donut with frosting and sprinkles, and we made it all, or almost all, using geometry nodes. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial series. I hope you learned something. If you make your own using this technique, and if you have like new ideas and maybe make better like drips on the sides or something, please do tag me on one of my socials. The finished blend file of what we did in this tutorial series is, of course, as always, available over on my Patreon page, and you can download it from there, and you can check out all the things. Maybe you missed something, or maybe something isn't working for you, so you have a finished blend file. Make sure though that you have the final, the latest version of Blender 2.93, and at the moment this is still in beta. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Crispy out.